We got it. And then switch it to the 1. Beauty. We did it.
Awesome.
Dude.
Amazing.
Welcome to the first ever Coles Ventures podcast. We haven't developed a name for it yet. So
well, thank you so much. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Really excited to be here. Jazzed to
That's awesome.
Jazzed to get to help you guys try this out.
I mean, it's kind of one of our like shining stars, like from start to finish. It's kind of like why we built Fuel Co-working is like for people like you guys. So happy to have you on as the first guest. But yeah, I mean, I guess like kind of introduce yourself, talk about yourself. What are you working on? The previous company, now working on a different company. Walk us through.
Absolutely. So high level, my name is Carter Bastian. I'm the CEO and founder of Code Lexica. So my background, I grew up in Spokane and then have kind of traveled around working on different parts of the tech industry. My career was primarily in software engineering and specifically like early startup software engineering. So have kind of seen the spectrum of like early to mid-sized to later stage startups. And more recently with the developments in AI, just became really, really interested in kind of like the practical side of AI and how we can use that to really augment our workflows as engineers in particular. Mm-hmm. So the company that I'm building now is called Code Lexica, and it is a platform that allows you to answer questions about your production scale code bases. So whether you're an engineer who's asking questions that are targeted around, let's say, context switching, and you're jumping into a new code base, you're onboarding, or you have a bug that's in a part of the code that you're unfamiliar with, we're getting really good at the process of helping you understand the code that already exists so that you can work with it more effectively. And then on the other side, we have kind of folks who are less technical, but also really rely on code on a day-to-day, right? People like non-technical CEOs, like enterprise mid-level directors, people who need to be able to answer questions like, at the most basic level, is this code good, right? Yeah. And what does that mean? As well as questions like, are we making progress? And also, how does it work? So kind of opening up a window into the tech to enable people who are less technical to be able to have more, high agency conversations with their technical employees. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's what we're doing. We are currently off to the races, and we have a handful of really excited design partners who've been giving us incredible feedback. We're getting ready for a public launch here in just the next handful of months. Nice. In fact, probably in early July.
That's awesome.
Fuel has been a big part of it. We've really enjoyed working from the co-working space and also like working hand in hand with you all.
For sure. That's awesome. Okay, so if you were to describe what you're working on in like one sentence, like I'm 5 years old, how would you say that?
Yeah, have a conversation with your code base, right?
Okay, just like normal, I get this stack of code, like I'm not a technical person, so right. I would have no idea if I get like handed, here's a whole code base for, I don't even know, 500 is like, what's like a normal amount of lines of code for like one code base?
It's a great question, and it varies
like I can't even throw out a number, like I have no idea.
You can have conversations that are, or you can have code bases that are millions of lines of code, right? Okay. And at production scale, that does happen.
Yeah.
A more common use case is you have maybe not one code base, but you have 5, 10, 20. You have a bunch of microservices running in production, and maybe each of those is owned by a different part of your team, right? Like it gets really complex really fast. And a lot of the tools that are really focused on writing code, like Cursor, the base models, Lovable, these are incredible tools for writing code. But ask any software engineer, they're going to tell you writing code is half the job, right? The other half is understanding the code that's already there.
Knowing what you're dealing with.
And so that's really the side that we're focused with.
Yeah. So I would get the code base, me having no idea, put it into your software, and then ask it, okay, what is this even doing?
Yeah.
And it would be like, this is exactly kind of ish what it's doing.
That's precisely it.
Dig deeper and deeper and deeper without actually having to know how to read code.
And so for our MVP, like the most basic level, it's a chatbot that is like a wrapper over the platform itself. And so the way this works, you log in, you link your code base in about 5 minutes, right? I think when we were onboarding one of your code bases at Cold Ventures, we were able to onboard you in about 10 minutes. You link it via GitHub. Yeah. We process it on the back end and add just a series of data that is synthetic and helps us answer questions better. And then you get a chatbot and you can start asking, what does this code do, right? Like, how does it work? How is it structured? And that's exactly the process.
That's awesome. Where'd you get the idea? Like what was like, because you were, I mean, I guess explain the previous company that you were working on. Because when we met, you were working on something completely different.
Yeah. So earlier, my last company was a company that was focused on AI development, IP understanding with AI. So we were leveraging AI to answer very, very targeted and specific questions about other people's IP. And so this was using code, it was using external data, and we were trying to automate that process of finding novel information and finding what is really new. Yeah. And so this is one really specific question that we were asking about primary source data. What I realized while building that was that there was a possibility to think a lot bigger picture, right? And specifically that, like, at the highest level, the interface with which we interact with code in general is going to change, right? So it's moving from a place where it's highly technical people who are reading code manually and working with it to a place where the primary interface is this interesting, English language to code compiler. And that with that, we're going to see a couple of trends, right? If more AI code is being written, there's going to be fewer engineers who are in charge of a larger surface area of that code, and they're going to be less familiar with it. Yeah. And so it was kind of while I was doing that I initially got this bug in my head that this would be a really interesting space to look at. And that's kind of how I got here, was realizing that the core technology was enabling me to create something that could answer questions about code that I'd written better than I could myself. Yeah,
I like it. And what was like the, I guess, defining moment? Because a lot of people have ideas. I mean, people have ideas for, oh, wouldn't this be such a great company? But like, what was the moment that you're like, okay, this is my idea. I think it's really good. I'm going to go build this. Because most people get stuck at that. You know, they're going from the idea, oh, that would be really cool. Somebody else will probably do it. Yeah. But you actually did it. So
that's a great question.
I mean, for a lot of people out there, they're probably like, I'm thinking of this idea. I'm mulling around, but I mean, what's the mover?
Yeah, for me, it was this January when I was first kind of building around, playing with like this core concept of like asking general questions about a code base. And I think the real kicker moment was the more I was talking to my friends. I was doing some contract work with a team that is building a Web3 product, and they were having all of these issues that really came down to communication. And communication both between devs who are working on different things early on, but also communication with their CEO who is semi-technical, who wants to be able to have these conversations. And as soon as I realized that this like kind of side thing that I was building was aligned in an incredible business way with and could answer all of these questions kind of in one go, that was the moment when I realized, okay, I need to build this. I need to see if the core concept works. And sure enough, it worked really, really well. And so then it became a matter of finding out, is this an extensible use case that we can, that will solve other people's problems as well?
Definitely. So what types of people are you going after in terms of customers? What's like your ideal customer fit?
Yeah, it's a great question. So this is actually a really interesting one, and it's a place where Code Lexica is kind of coming from approach to startup building that wasn't really possible 5 years ago and is very anti the best advice that you'll get from most VCs, right? The prototypical startup advice is find one specific problem and then build an incredible solution to it. And so you build a product, right? The idea is always don't go broad. And we decided in the earliest iteration of the product, we were going to build a platform first, which is inherently broad. Now, the reason why I think this works now and didn't work 5 years ago is that we can leverage AI to be able to build, once we have a platform that works and works well for the general use case, we can then use AI as leverage to spin up not only very specific product instances on top of it to solve one specific problem, but also we can spin up go-to-market campaigns, landing pages to be able to test this with real data. So right now, our ideal customer, we've been effectively giving it to anybody, giving early access to anybody who interfaces with code, from developers all the way to enterprise execs. And the goal is to use data and figure out what questions they're asking this thin GPT wrapper layer, and try and pick out with data what are the problems that people are using this to solve.
Yeah.
Right? We've handed them a wrench. What are they building?
Right.
And because we're able to do this in an age where we can really, really rapidly iterate and spin up experiments, we're able to make these decisions with data. So right now, the 3 primary targets that we're looking at and experimenting with and who are actively using the platform today are developers, either on a team, some of them are vibe coders, some of them are, like individual contractors. We have engineering managers, and then last we have non-technical executives. And so the types of questions that they're asking are a little bit different, but the platform is servicing all of them well at the moment. And so the question really becomes, at what point do we specify down and choose one path?
Yeah.
And we're kind of using this throw spaghetti at a wall phase to be able to answer that question with data and real customer usage rather than with intuition and less scalable approaches to figuring that market out.
Definitely. I like it. In terms of competitors or people who might try to, because this seems like something that, when I hear you explain what you do, it's like very obvious of like, obviously this should exist. Like, why has no one done this before? And so when you're looking at kind of the competitive market of people that might come along and, try to compete for the same market as you or try to make a similar tool that you're using, how would you say that your company differentiates itself from any other company that could, because like Cursor could probably spin up 15 of their devs and create something somewhat similar that would explain code. Like how is your company different from something like that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So like, to be clear, it is already a pretty crowded landscape. The way that we kind of frame the overall market is that right now, using AI to write code is effectively a gold rush, right? And the goal is AI code generation. So everybody is chasing after being the best platform for writing code. What I think a lot of people in the market are missing right now is that, writing code is like the flashy, sexy first half of the problem, and then working with the code that you've written is that second half. So in this gold rush, code understanding is kind of the shovel, whereas everybody right now is fighting over the really accessible early stages of the gold. Okay. When it comes to the question of like differentiability and why can't Cursor just come in and do this, I think there's a deeply technical reason, which is a little bit more involved, that has to do with how we treat context in the LLM. But effectively, like the two like layman's approaches, one is for really detailed work, the best thing you can do is throw as much context into the LLM as you can, and basically whittle away, like if you're looking at a code base and you want to make a change to it, try and eliminate the things that you are 100% sure aren't relevant, and then throw the rest of it into the context window. Yeah. Our approach is fundamentally the opposite. So all of that extra data that is really helpful in detail work becomes noise when you're looking at abstract questions, and you're trying to ask questions that are a little bit broader. The kinds of questions that human beings, and especially non-technical human beings, want to ask. And so our approach is to, instead of using these approaches to just whittle away a little bit of the code base, we want to take a scalpel to it, and we want to custom build this context with synthetic layers of contextualization on top of this knowledge graph, and we want to be able to find exactly the right, small number of files, as well as like synthetic context that is summarized and like reframed from across the code base, and we want to be able to form the smallest possible set of information that we have about your code to answer the question. So all of that noise is gone, and all of a sudden the LLM is able to give significantly better results.
Kind of a less is more
Yeah,
approach.
and so to answer your question in defensibility, there's only so much you can do if you're a code generation company to move towards our approach without cutting into your own, core value proposition of writing code well. And you're going to lose market share to the extent that you invest in that.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. And what's your team look like? I'm assuming from all these software things and all this stuff, you have a massive dev team, fully stocked fridge. You have top floor of the Salesforce building, and
so you know pretty well because you see me here in Fuel quite a bit. So it is not that way. We are building very, very lean. So far, I wanted to build the product, get the first customers, demonstrate the market, and really figure out the strategy before I brought anybody else on. So I've been building as a solo founder since January. MVP went live about, I would say, 6 weeks ago. Have been doing pretty aggressive distribution and getting those early design partners now. We are just now expanding. So Because it's still in process, I think my legal would be upset if I named names, but we have brought on a COO who is incredible, and are in the process of bringing him on, I should say, who is truly incredible, has been working and advising on the product for a while, knows the industry because they've been in pretty much every seat, so they have a pretty storied career as a high-level exec at bigger tech startups, and they are joining to help effectively with everything because that's what startups do. Right. They are actively joining as we speak, and we're going to be really focused on getting that exponential growth, finding that initial customer profile that will get us to product market fit really early, as well as designing those go-to-market campaigns. Yeah. And we have a handful of engineers in the running for early engineering hire next month as we kind of scale up. So we've finally hit the point in customer demand where being a solo founder isn't cutting it anymore.
Can't do it all.
And it's, I think the biggest alpha for the company right now would be me getting an extra hour of sleep per night. Yeah. But that being said, the game plan from here is also not to scale to that size. I think our approach is very much to live and breathe as an AI-first company, which means scaling with AI automation and not with headcount. So every process that we do, we're building AI into the forefront of it, whether that is engineering with our AI workflow for writing code, whether that is go-to-market in how we're orchestrating our early advertising campaigns and content generation, or our CRM management and getting those initial lead harvesting, really trying to save human hours for the things that humans can still do best. And the goal is to continue doing that for a very, very long time.
Nice. That's awesome. So from your expertise and experience with coding and software development, and you've worked in tech, big and large and small and all in between. AI is a pretty buzzy word at the moment. Everyone's throwing AI around, kind of whatever. What are you seeing in terms of what is actually here and what people are actually using it for versus kind of where it's going and where it's going to be, in your opinion?
Yeah. So can't understate, it sounds self-interested to say AI is a revolutionary technology. I truly think that can't be understated enough. I have two, hot takes about the AI space right now and where it is and where it's headed. My first hot take is that I think we're hitting diminishing returns in terms of core model investment into LLMs. I think that a bigger context window is mattering less and less. And I think that even reasoning within that bigger context window, I think we're hitting the point where we're kind of getting closer to the other side of the logistic curve there. There's still lots more to do, and I think we're going to see some incredible improvements. But my other hot take is that I don't think that matters at all. I think if we were to pause AI development today and nothing changed, none of the models changed, I think in 10 years the world would still look very different. Yeah. Because I think the crux of where we're going to see these really incredible improvements are in AI agency, in the ability and effectively not the theoretical side of LLMs, but the practical side, the practitioners who are just now figuring out the best practices for building AI into traditional software algorithms, right? Who are figuring out how to enable them with tools and also prompt them correctly to get this right reasoning and use them agentically. So I think that AI is going to continue to improve in incredible ways. I think we might already be far enough that it doesn't matter if we make any more advances. Yeah. But I think the world's going to look very different in 5-10 years. And I don't really know how to predict more than 2 or 3 years into the future at this point. Yeah,
no, that's fair. I feel with the majority of people using it with ChatGPT or Gemini, or if you use, any of the other ones, a lot of people are just using it for, hey, I wrote this email, make it sound more professional. Or hey, here's my resume, make it better. What kind of, with the majority of people using it on such a low level, where do you see it kind of going in terms of the majority of the population being integrated into their lives? Because I feel for the majority of people, especially with the huge population of baby boomers still out there, most of them not using AI, have no idea. They're oh, this AI thing, that's for other people, tech people, I don't do that. Sure. So how do you see it kind of integrating into just everyday life, where it's just kind of, it's there and maybe you don't even know?
Yeah, that's, I think the crux of it is AI is going to be running a lot of stuff in the background, right? I think this is happening more and more already. I think what we're seeing is a series of AI tools that are really making decisions and also doing really challenging tasks, but they aren't necessarily being used by the everyday person because they don't need to be, right? Like the everyday person doesn't need to be able to prompt a code base to try and understand it, right? But if they do need that, there's going to be a tool for that, and that's Code Lexica. I think that same model applies in a lot of various places, and I think as more and more of the consumer-facing tech is pushed in that direction, like customer service is a great example. I think already most customer service and various processes that surround getting help with the consumer product, a lot of them are using AI in the background. Sometimes unnoticeably and sometimes in really ugly and painful ways, right? Like nobody likes being stuck in a phone tree. Nobody likes having to cancel an application through a chatbot. I think those processes are going to get smoother, and I think that that enablement is going to allow just incredible improvements in efficiency for companies across scale that will make the end experience better for the user, whether or not they know AI is happening.
As kind of a person that's worked in various startups in different capacities and whatever, what do you think is the most important thing that you've learned as a founder for other founders to know? Maybe aspiring founders or first time, second time, fourth time, whatever. What would be your red flag of like, hey, you should, if you're gonna do this, you should know X?
So I guess it depends on the stage that you're at, right? If you want to be a founder, you want to be involved really early, the best piece of advice that I have for you is go talk to other people who are doing it. Find people who are doing exciting stuff and ask them how you can help, or just talk to them about what they're doing. Like surround yourself with other people doing similar things. And I think Fuel is a great place for that. I think Launchpad INW is also an incredible place for that here in Spokane. But find that community. I think if you are a first-time founder who is a little bit confused about the process and you're still kind of brushing up on how do I fundraise? How do I, think about what does product market fit mean, right? These are really hard questions, and a lot of them are institutional. So there's good resources like YC's Startup School. Accelerators are wonderful for this type of knowledge. And my biggest piece of advice would be learn the traditional startup conventional wisdom and learn not just what that wisdom is and taking it at blind faith, but also learn why it's there so that when the time comes that you need to break it, you are able to understand why. And you're able to choose to do that intentionally.
That makes sense. I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but accelerators. So you're currently in one, you went through the whole application process. I mean, I guess for somebody that's looking at kind of going that route, what advice would you have? And then also kind of just a brief overview on how it's going. And is it helpful, not helpful, or is it overblown? You don't even need it. I mean, where kind of do you sit on that realm?
So accelerators, I have a lot of opinions about, and probably more so than most founders, I am very pro accelerator for a handful of reasons. So for context, if you don't know what an accelerator is, it is a kind of structured program usually thrown by a venture capital group where they will bring you and your co-founders and then a bunch of other teams together in a batch of startups, and they will generally invest in all of you. And they will throw some structured curricula together to help you understand and share resources.
Like super special startup school.
Effectively, and in person. So the most famous example, the kind of gold standard in the industry right now is Y Combinator. They kind of invented this model. There's a series of other ones that are also popping up, and some of them are really big. So Andreessen Horowitz has S16Z Speedrun, which is an ongoing one. There are a handful that are specific to AI. And the one that we're doing right now is called Antler. So Antler, this is an interesting case because their batches usually happen twice a year. And for us, they wanted us to come in off cycle, so in between batches. So it's right now just us and I think two other really awesome companies who started at the same time as us. We're just doing 3 weeks instead of their traditional 6. And Antler's approach is a little bit different, which is they basically just give you a stipend to come work with them. And the goal is they want to feel out if they like working with you in person and vice versa. Because I think that in the early stages of a company, it makes a lot of sense to be really focused on the active value that your VC and fundraising partners can give you.
For sure.
And that includes being able to brainstorm, especially if you're a first-time founder. That's really helpful to say, hey, am I charging enough for my enterprise customers, right? Or, hey, like I'm thinking about hiring this person and they want X, Y, Z. Like, does that make sense? Is that standard? The other real value add is the community, right? So are you in touch with other founders and really putting yourself in that position to be working with interesting people, sharing knowledge, working together? Some of them will be your customers. And like that's really valuable as well. So just quick shout out to Antler. I think that process has been really, really incredible. Working with their team out in Austin for the last week has been great. But even before that, they were hopping on phone calls with me, letting me leverage their expertise for customer discovery. And they have a really interesting framework for taking customers or taking startups from early stage to very successful seed. So they're really focused on the stage of the company that we're at right now, which is effectively pre-seed. So that's going fantastic. I flew back here to onboard some customers for a couple of days this weekend, and then I'm flying back on Thursday and going to spend the rest of the month out there with them.
That's awesome.
And we'll have more information there soon, but
awesome.
Would highly recommend it.
Yeah. So being that you're off cycle, kind of you're in the thick of it, but would you have preferred to have been on cycle just for the longer time span, probably more companies, more exposure, all of that? Which, if you had to choose, red pill, blue pill?
So it really is like the small group versus big group question, right?
Yeah.
Like Y Combinator is famously a very big group. They take on hundreds of portfolio companies every 3 months. And Antler is smaller group. We're going to take on a couple dozen and then select very carefully the partners that we work with. For us, we're even smaller group, which is we have a miniature batch. I think for me that was the right call because this isn't my first rodeo, and so I think I would have gotten less. I think the more structured materials would have been a little bit distracting from what I need to be doing for the company right now. And then also there's the other factor, which is I love Spokane. I want to minimize the amount of time that I'm spending outside of Spokane because I love it so much. And so I think 6 weeks would have been a tall order. That said, in the event that me and Antler decide that it is a good partnership, I probably will spend some time in their next batch out in New York working with the other founders and just enjoying that community and getting to work with other people for sure. So that sounds fun. Yeah.
That's kind of rolls into my next question is why Spokane, I guess? You're from Spokane, love the area, but when most people think of high growth tech startups, they're not thinking Spokane, Washington.
Yeah, it's a great question. And Spokane has so many bright points right now. And I think it's extremely underlooked and I think it's undervalued, but also I think it has a lot of places to grow. I think one of the core things you want to think about both in personal career and also in startups is leverage. Where are the points where you can apply leverage really early that compounds over time? I think that one of those points is your selection in location and your selection in how you run your company. So I am a big believer in remote work and fully intend to have a remote first company. That being said, in the early stages of chasing product market fit, you really want to work in person as much as you can because there's some magic there. And I think one of the reasons I chose Spokane and why I want to build here as much as I can is that there are so many incredible resources and there are so many people excited and willing to help and ready to jump in. There's great companies being built. There's not a ton of community yet, but it's being actively invested in, right? I think you all are doing a great job of that. I think the Launchpad INW initiative that is really getting up and running and is throwing these awesome events, the community is being created. And I think it's a real leverage point to be somewhere that is not already saturated, but is still in its fledgling stages of developing this startup and especially early stage startup community and is growing rapidly. So there's that factor. And then there's the other factor, which is, Spokane is home. Spokane is home base for me. And as we hire and grow and scale the team, we want to start in Spokane first. And for anything that we can't find in Spokane, but we absolutely need, that's when we go remote.
Yeah, that makes sense. Has there ever been a point at which you wish you had been based somewhere else? Maybe you're sitting there and you're like, God, it'd be really nice if I was just in the Bay Area or in Seattle or Austin or New York or wherever, that it would be easier to kind of make those connections in that more saturated market.
Yeah, there are times where being in Spokane is not the best for a startup. I think right now the kind of blind spot in the community is pre-seed stage funding. I think one of the reasons why not a ton of startups come from Spokane, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem, right? The chicken side is that there aren't a lot of startups that have started here already, so there's not a lot of exposure to what you can do, right? I think that will change over time. The egg side is that, frankly, fundraising in Spokane as a pre-seed company is really hard.
Tough.
So there's this blind spot where Spokane does have some investment capital and they want to invest and they want to be involved in especially local startups that are growing. I think there's a general risk aversion for a lot of Spokane investors because that investment total pool is smaller. They're throwing bigger chunks of it into a small handful of companies. And so when that's your investment approach, you really want to minimize the risk of those investments, and you're going to be extremely risk averse. So that means that generally they're investing in companies that have proven traction, are showing good revenue numbers, are either late seed or like early Series A. And I think for those companies, fundraising in Spokane is very feasible and very doable. In my experience, I'm about to start the second time fundraising for a venture-backed company. The first time I did it, I really struggled to find, I wanted to include Spokane in that process and struggled to find those investors.
Yeah.
I think the reason being that, other venture capital firms, their model is to make 100 bets, fully expecting 90 of those to fail, 9 of them to break even, and 1 of them to provide, 1,000x returns. And that's kind of the pre-seed investment model. And I don't think we have enough infrastructure here to really support that.
Yeah.
Because that means you can be less risk averse and you can invest in, really talented teams. You can invest in really novel and cool ideas, and you're able to write off some of the risk that comes with investing in something that hasn't been built yet in a way that you just can't do with smaller teams.
Yeah.
So I think that the more that we can grow not only the basket of companies which started here and made it to seed, but also the basket of investors who are ready to, maybe pool funds or, find some way to invest with a more pre-seed oriented approach. I think that's when fundraising gets easier in Spokane.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you're totally right. It's there's a lot of people here that aren't even accustomed or knowledgeable about the AI space. It's really hard for them to be like, wait, you've been doing this for, 5 months, 6 months. Why would I give you, 25, 50, 100, however much it is? But no, I think you're completely right. But yeah, I think you're right too, that it's it is a growing market. And even though it's kind of a little lagging, people always compare it to Seattle, that it's we're always over the cusp. And I feel I don't know that it'll ever get over that cusp, just because of I feel once you've started here, you can kind of grow in tandem, but I don't know if you're ever gonna overtake a place. When people talk about that, it's always in the verbiage of at some point we will get exactly where they are. But there's so many people here that's wouldn't even want it that way.
That's true, but also at the same time, there are counterexamples, right?
For sure.
New York caught up with San Francisco really early in venture, and there are people that'll argue that, and I would say it's a close enough to be a wash.
All the Bay Area VCs right now are absolutely not.
Right. But then also Austin, right? Austin is a major tech hub in really interesting ways, as is Seattle, right? We do see cities that maybe weren't initially, that aren't San Francisco, catching up to San Francisco. And if they can do that to San Francisco, then I think there's also a way that we can do that to Seattle.
For sure.
And also, I don't want to underwrite, or undersell, Spokane has some incredible startup companies that are very early stage, and also ones that are making it later stage. One that comes to mind is Credential Network with Dylan Avatar. They've started fairly recently and are building just something incredible. There's a whole series of great resources, great companies, great founders here in Spokane. And I think what it's going to take for us to be on track to catch up is one, just real breakout success. And if we have a breakout success that is super recent in recent history, and we have the community that you all are building right now to really foster that, then I think those two things together will come together and just really accelerate the progress of Spokane.
Where do you want this company to go? Are we going IPO? Are we going? What do we think? What if you could wave a magic wand and say, I want to go? Because some people don't. Some people are like, you know what? I'm okay with just being here and just like being like not under the radar, but under the radar in terms of like I want to be public. I don't want all that stress or pressure. Employees like I'm cool with being kind of lifestyle versus more shoot to the moon kind of story.
There's a place for that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that place is. I think more companies should do that than shouldn't.
Definitely.
I think that most companies that think they need venture funding really don't.
100%.
I think there are exceptions. And one of the exceptions is the exact scenario that we're in, where right now, AI and AI tooling is a land grab, right? And the way that I frame this to investors is, like with that gold rush shovel like metaphor that I made earlier, in somewhere in the next 2, 3, 5 years, the early gold is going to dry up and people are going to realize that they need shovels. That is the blocking problem. And we basically, as Code Lexica, have until that happens to build such a compelling product that is widely loved by users and is just so intimidating in terms of not just product quality, but also market share, that when those competitors are looking at us, when the incumbents are switching over to like, oh man, we have to focus on shovels, that it makes more sense to buy our shovel factory or leverage us as customers than it does for them to try and compete with us. Yeah. We have to be so good that it is risky for Cursor or for OpenAI to try and compete with us on our specialty side of the market. And so that is the inherent bet that we're making. And as a result of that, that means we have to scale fast, right? We have to be, like lovable style scaling. We have to be scale AI style scaling, where we are really, really building and racing to market share as quickly as possible. And in order to do that, that is something where venture funding is, really helpful, and not just helpful, but absolutely necessary, right? So for us, definitely not a company that I think is workable as a lifestyle company. I think it's one where we have to move faster than revenue scaling allows. And to answer your question, I don't think going public will be the exit. I think like Stripe says that's still not a good idea for them, and they're very, very far and down the road. I don't know what all benefits there are to going public at this point, and really haven't thought too much about that. Yeah. I think a more likely exit is going to be like acquisition down the road. But I could be wrong, and that's a problem that we'll take when we get there. Yeah. So.
No, for sure. I think you hit on something so important, because I think your answer tells me exactly what I need for like, you're absolutely ready for like VC scale stuff. Because the people that I ask that same question to of like, where do you think this is going? Like, what do you want this to be? And if there's any hesitation of like, I don't know. Like, I'm gonna be cool with like, it'd be great if we hit like $1 million a year, $2 million a year. It's like, okay, those people, and then they come to us and they're like, we're ready for VC funding. I'm like, no, you don't need to. And it's kind of, in your situation, completely makes sense. But it's also like golden handcuff situation. Because like if you don't have that mindset and you do take money, and then you're almost getting into uncharted waters that you didn't know you signed up for. Because our, VC's expectations of, okay, we've given you money, you need to now go, and instead of scaling, 50% a year, we want you to scale 500% a year. Like, we need to like go, because it's just how it is. So yeah, I think 9 out of 10 people that come to us or come to anybody that are thinking of starting a company or doing that, they're like, we're ready for VC funding. Like, if you don't have to, like, don't. It's like, for the majority of people, it's not necessary.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think like it's also, talking to first-time founders, I think this is a big point of confusion in like how to go about fundraising. I think when you're fundraising your current round, you need to be thinking about the next round, right? Yeah. And the overall goal should be, we need to raise XYZ money to get from point A to point B. And we need to know what success at point B looks like, and we need to raise more money than we think that we need in order to get there. Yeah. Right. And we need to have a timeline. Yeah. It's awesome to aim for. I mean, like the revenue goals have changed significantly with AI.
Shifted a lot.
Yeah, and
which sucks for
people. Which really matter, right? Like one of the things that we're going to be measuring really intently is not just like raw revenue, right? But Obviously, you want to know your marginal costs, so the like kind of token economics of your growth. But even more than that, like I think the metric that I'm really interested in is revenue per employee. So that to me is a measure of how successful are we being at being AI first, right? And like our goal is somewhere between in like the early stages, $1.5 million to 3 million ARR per employee. And that's kind of our goal going into like, let's say a seed round. And I think that like aiming for those types of metrics and really understanding like if getting to 1 million ARR or 10 million ARR is terrifying, like that's okay. It should be, like those are big numbers. But I think you need to have a plan to get there before you're raising a pre-seed round.
For sure.
And you need to know where you're going to be when you're going into a seed.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, last one is, if you weren't doing this, what else would you be doing? I mean, we talked a little bit about your time at Khan Academy. Maybe you got some Dartmouth, connections you could use. Maybe you're, I don't know, playing a banjo down on the beach somewhere.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. I think that if I wasn't building Code Lexica, I would still want to be working actively in the AI space. I think right now there's incredible demand for AI practitioners as software engineers. We hear these stories of obviously like Zuckerberg asking for theorist LLM developers, right? People who are doing the pre-training and building these foundational models and paying them crazy $10 million a year cash comp, which is absurd. I don't think I would want to work at big tech. I think I would still be really interested in the startup space, and I would want to be building effectively the same structural things that I'm building in Code Lexica, but for somebody else. So I'd probably join an early stage startup and really focus on their engineering workflow, on their like kind of automation processes, and be just an AI engineer. Definitely. And specifically an applied AI engineer. That being said, I think the alternative that I would take is I think there's a lot of space for companies that don't want to be venture funded right now. So I have a handful of side projects that like provide really passive income with a lot of people here in Spokane actually. And building those is a lot of fun. Doing the indie hacker route and vibe marketing a product and spinning up these new products, like that is I've always been curious how much hype is there versus how much reality. And so I would probably explore that if I wasn't doing Code Lexica. And if I just decided to get out of tech entirely, I don't know, I'd probably go play the keyboard for a band here locally and maybe bartend at the Volstead Act. So.
That's the way to go. Okay, cool, man. We'll wrap this up, but thanks for being on the pod.
Yeah, thank you so much. Cool. And like truly incredible work with Fuel. What you all are doing is so exciting and has been game-changing for Code Lexica. For anybody who ends up watching this and is interested in reaching out and getting involved in Code Lexica in any type of way, we can talk about, to investors as we go into our first fundraising round, as people who are interested in the product and want to try it out and start asking questions about your code. Or as people who are interested in contributing or just talking about it, feel free to reach out at carter@codelexica.com. And you can also follow us on LinkedIn and just search Code Lexica.
All right.
Yeah, thank you so much. Cheers, guys.
Cool.